We are on the main square of the capital of Chechnya, but homes have been turned into lifeless empty boxes in other regions of Grozny as well. The number 2 children's hospital has been destroyed, which was completely out of the zone of combat. Today from the city, a new wave of refugees flowed out, those who had still believed that war would end quickly and wouldn't affect them. Even those people are attempting to leave who have virtually no place to go. These are basically Russians, and there are many of them here. When we were leaving the very epicenter of the war, the center of Grozny, in the presidential palace, active fighting was underway there still, and so as not to play on the nerves of our television viewers, my cameraman and driver, Alexander Migunov, and I decided to end this report somewhat on the side, where hundreds of thousands and perhaps even more peaceful residents are taking cover from the war. The debate about whether it was necessary to deploy forces in Grozny or not is already secondary. Currently, the main question is how to most quickly stop the bloodshed. According to reports of our correspondents and information agencies and also the press service of the government, today Russian troops are in control of the majority of the Chechen capital. Blockading and dismemberment of groups of the Dudayev gunmen continues. Literally from house to house, from street to street, they are beginning to be squeezed out in the direction of the flaming building of the former apparatus of the Communist Party in the center of the city. Dudayev units are presenting a stubborn resistance, implementing tactics of small group action. Units, still combat capable through the available corridor, are moving toward the south of the Republic into the mountains, and this threatens, in perspective, of becoming partisan war. At the same time, in the villages Dargo and Dishny Vidinek, for example, according to the combat intelligence, local residents, fearing danger, have not provided a haven, but on the contrary, rejected the gunmen. According to reports from the commander of the internal forces of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, in the villages Alpatov and Kalinovskaya, local residents are providing practical assistance to troops of internal forces by organizing extra protection for significant objects, railway stations, the local airport, against possible attacks by the gunmen. It's also reported that to the Northern Caucasus, by the efforts of the Ministry of Emergency Situations, already 144 tons of humanitarian cargoes were delivered, which are being distributed in Chechnya. Our correspondents who are in Chechnya, and especially Sergei Minchenko, citing the words of Sergei Kovalyov, reported additional information, and it was confirmed here in Moscow by Sergei Yushchenkov. That regards the report that the Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin is undertaking steps to regularize the Chechen conflict. He has organized dialogues on the temporary truce in Grozny, and he spoke about this over the phone with the authorized human rights representative of Russia, Sergei Kovalyov, who is in Nazran. If this initiative is realized, Yushchenkov said to the agency post factum, in Chechen events a new phase will begin, and Chernomyrdin will manage to do for the crisis what Oleg Lobov and Nikolai Yegorov couldn't do. Probably this is why Sergei Kovalyov today did not leave Nazran for Grozny, and as a correspondent of Viktor Tass was told, a decision is being made on what is best to do next. Apart from that, Sergei Kovalyov is attempting to organize the removal of injured Russian military who are in prison in the Dudayev residence in the center of Grozny. And now the report of our colleagues from Combat Television, who also just returned from Chechnya. Federal forces encountered great difficulties in conducting combat in the populated points. Here special tactics are required, since the Dudayev gunmen in advance created defensive barriers, camouflaged their firearms, and set up artillery points on the site. Each street, each building of Grozny is occupied with great difficulty, and there are losses. I will name myself and say that it's not worth it to fly over us. I'm Captain Antonov. They have just cut down my friend. I served with him for 10 years. We went to school together. And he just died in the front line. Chechen snipers are attempting to destroy officers and commanders of the units. There are cases when duties of the commanders of regiments are carried by sergeants. This exit from the hospital, located in the bomb shelter of the city hospital, is constantly under sniper fire. The gunmen have a broad network of mortar firing installations and guides. According to the soldiers, after 2 or 3 days of combat, their sense of self-preservation grows dull. At the same time, combat experience and confidence in success grows. I send regards to my mother. Let her not worry. I'm alive and well. Everything's all right, and I'll return home. 3 medical helicopters of the federal forces en route to Grozny for injured were shot down by Dudaev gunmen. This was reported by the Vice Speaker of the Federative Council today, Anatoly Dolgolaptyev. Meanwhile, the parents of Russian military servicemen are holding protest demonstrations. Today there was another one in Moscow, and mothers of soldiers are making their way to Grozny. Interfax was told by the deputy of the Duma, Avar Sluzhdin, they, under incessant fire in the capital of Chechnya, are viewing bodies of dead Russian soldiers in search of their children. In Moscow, a series of burials continues. Today, in the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia, a mournful farewell ceremony was held for the Major General of the militia, Viktor Vorobyov. In Chechnya, he was in charge of the actions of the militia units and tragically died the 7th of January in Grozny. To protect the lives of his subordinates, among whom was his son Vladimir, was the basic commandment of the general, and his adherence to it was sacred. I would like to believe that this death would bring us not only grief and not only the pain of loss, but that this death would become one more confirmation of the fact that we together are obliged on the territory of the Russian Federation to provide order. Viktor Vasilievich Vorobyov will be buried Tuesday in Stavropol next to the grave of his mother. Today's planned round table in Pyatigorsk, where it was planned to discuss the solutions for the situation in Chechnya and improving the situation in the entire Northern Caucasus region, was postponed. This was learned from a telegram of the co-chairman of the round table, the Deputy Speaker of the Federative Council, Ramazan Abdullah-Tipov. The Vice Speaker of the Federative Council expressed deep regret because at the Friday's Security Council of Russia meeting, in essence, there was no recommendation to hold the round table in Pyatigorsk. And all the last few days, journalists are examining the question, how did such a quantity of weapons end up in the hands of the Chechen gunmen? The sensational statement of Marshal Shaposhnikov in the program Vesti evoked no reciprocal reaction from the current Minister of Defense, Pavel Grachov, and today we clarified the point of view of the General Gromov. And so how did it happen that Dudaev ended up with so many weapons? How could it happen? In the end of 1991, at that time, I was the first deputy of the head commander of the land surface troops. In the head command, the question arose regarding maintaining the safe storage of ammunition and weapons. At that time, I flew to Grozny, as was said by Mr. Shahrai, with Mr. Sprudnikov and Denikin. I flew there in the beginning of 1991 in order to clarify the question connected with the withdrawal of the families of military servicemen, because the situation then was already complicated and some of the weapons and ammunition at that time had already been seized by Dudaev. The question arose regarding how many weapons could be potentially seized by Dudaev and, in general, how to preserve it and to remove it. Such a decision was not made by the leadership of the Ministry of Defense at that time. And as far as I understand, that was because they simply didn't believe that Dudaev could take all those weapons. Therefore, a decision was made simply to fortify the patrol, mine access to the stockpiles and warehouses, not with combat mines, but signal mines, in short, to undertake such additional measures and fortify the situation with officers, because there were no longer soldiers in that division at the time, and these measures were undertaken. Subsequently, Pavel Sergeyevich Grachov flew there, and he was the very first to fly there on the weapons matter, since he was the first Deputy Minister of Defense of Mr. Shaposhnikov, and simultaneously he was the chairman of the Committee on Defense of the former Russian Federation, then it was the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic, and so he flew there. Evidently, he made such a decision, and as is known, in the beginning of May of 1992, he, as the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, signed the corresponding instructions in which he determined that 50% of the weapons under that division, in the possession of that division, to transfer to Dudaev, and the other 50% was to be removed. That was the sequence of events. The President of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, today offered his personal assistance in resolving the Chechen conflict. He feels it's an internal affair of Russia, although, as it is said, it would not be advisable to permit such a development of events. Nazarbayev also offers humanitarian aid to peaceful citizens of Chechnya. As a result of combat in Grozny and around it, the flow of people leaving Chechnya, as previously, does not subside. Here, to Nazran daily, 600 refugees arrive. Through the funds which were dispersed by the government of Russia, the immigration services have an opportunity to process and supply people appealing for aid with food and temporary housing. In the same, the directors of the Northern Caucasus Railway have issued more than 10 passenger trains. The government of the Republic, Ingushetia, is also providing as much aid as possible to refugees. However, many refugees don't agree that they should leave Nazran because they don't yet know the fate of their friends or relatives who remained in Grozny. Apart from that, people still nurture the hope that soon peace will be restored there and they will be able to return to their homes, to their native lands, and the tombs of their forefathers. On the 8th of January, in the Territorial Migration Services, 388 people appealed who were forced to leave the Chechen Republic. Overall, in 1 month, 58,563 refugees have been recorded. Their reception and housing will demand 38 billion rubles monthly. This is calculated by the Federal Immigration Service of Russia. Rumors are circulating more rampantly on what material expenditures the war in Chechnya will require in subsequent restoration of the civilian infrastructure there, and why should we feed on rumors and not receive real information from government structures? In our studio today, we have the aide of the President of Russia, Alexander Yakovlevich Lifshitz. Please tell me, how much will the war in Chechnya cost and the subsequent restoration of the daily business life? Recently, we heard an absolutely unreal indicator, such as 15 trillion rubles for the year 1995. The real indicator, even if this conflict is protracted somewhat, will not exceed between 4 and 5 trillion rubles. That is 1/3 of what is spoken about in this connection. This is approximately 2% of the overall expenditure of the federal budget. This is much, but this does not produce economic catastrophe. Alexander Yakovlevich, I immediately ask the question, will this money be taken from my pocket or the pockets of our viewers, or where will you get the money? Such possibilities still exist. That is, I have in mind possibilities to avoid the pocket of the Russian citizen, and we can get sufficient money by liquidating several types of privileges in the foreign economic activities. We may borrow from internal sources. In any case, I will repeat that the 2% expenditure, even though it may be not pleasant, a catastrophe will not ensue. The catastrophe occurs for another reason. When the inflationary expectations are destabilized, we currently are on the verge of the inflation of panic and fear, the inflation of hysteria, which of course must be prevented. According to our calculations, in January and February, expectations will define at least half of the growth in prices. Just imagine, if there is no psychosis, then conditionally speaking, prices will, let's say, grow by 7 or 8% per month, and there is a paranoia of 15 to 16% increase per month. There's a great difference. And in this plan, the responsibility is very great of those people who are in a position of trust. So, if you don't know the figures, you shouldn't scare, you shouldn't shake up or sow fear among the people. Thank you very much for your information. Additional budgetary expenditures are demanded also by accidents which occurred. Today there's news of another one which occurred on the oil pipeline near Usinsk in Komi. Almost 50 cubic meters of oil flowed out of the old pipeline and polluted a territory of almost 1/3 of a hectare of land. A new pipeline was supposed to be completed in December of 1994, but it has not yet been completed fully. And in the economic chronicle of the day, the almost sensational news today, which was brought by our correspondent from Zheleznogorsk, in that city, there are neither political parties nor poor. In Zheleznogorsk, which is in the Kursk district, the brick plant is in full operation. However, here, no common city festivities, as it was done previously, were organized here. Now, this is a purely internal affair of the plant's staff and their partners from the Czech Republic, who have built and installed the equipment. No one rushed the builders. The people knew themselves the quicker the goods were produced, the quicker everyone would begin to profit. And the demand to acquire Russian Czech bricks, inexpensive and of very high quality, even in the small Zheleznogorsk city, is more than sufficient. We have 800 people employed, receiving normal salaries, and they have normal housing. I feel that such homes today should become the norm. For workers, of course, such cottages cannot be afforded, except for the very affluent, but judging from the progress in the city and suburbs, you begin to believe that demand for brick can only grow. The monthly yield in the plant is sufficient for 60 such homes. And furthermore, in Zheleznogorsk, there are no poor and there are no political parties. People here simply work and simply live. To New York in 1 hour, and the prospect of sea transportation. 2 more video reports of the day from our correspondents. Just recently, for the objectives directed at this building, the film crews had to give explanations to competent authorities, and today the holding company, Lenins, the largest company of the military-industrial sector here, has sustained its scientific and manufacturing potential. Evidence of this is the unique technological development. The most impressive of them is the aerospace system Ajax. Such a supersonic airplane will overcome the distance between Moscow and New York in only 1.5 hours. At the Lenitsk, they're confident that if all goes well, the first flight may occur in 10 years. Having worked almost 5 years on Russia's largest ferry transportation line between Sakhalin and the continent, the diesel-electrical power Sakhalin 9 has shifted its course for Kaliningrad. The Baltic ship lines is experiencing a severe deficit of ships for shipping cargo and passengers between Kaliningrad and Vyborg. All of this has precipitated the mutually beneficial transaction. On the Baltic, only 2 Sakhalin ferry cargo ships will operate, which were built incidentally at the Kaliningrad shipbuilding plant. Amber features high seaworthy qualities and reliability, which was tested in the stormy Far Eastern seas. In the Altai Rim, they feel that the economy may be lifted with the aid of environmentally safe mukluks, that is, heavy felt boots. The fact that their production has been launched in full seriousness was reported to a correspondent of Vitortas. Today, they seriously spoke about the economic perspective in Chisinau. In Moldova, a regional conference of the CIS and Baltic countries opened on the problems of international trade. In Belarus, the session of parliament today began examining the draft budget in the second reading. With the budget, they have as many problems as we do. For discussion by Belarusian parliamentarians, another vital draft law will be submitted about the President of the Republic of Belarus. Today, the President has serious problems with the press. The Union of Journalists of Belarus issued an appeal to the international confederations and the Federation of Journalists in which it expresses concern and alarm regarding the extremely tense relations which have developed between the President Alexander Lukashenko and Belarusian press. Not a half year passed since the President's promise not to infringe on freedom of speech acquired a strange interpretation. The head editor of the Soviet Belarus was dismissed. Igor Rasinsky, accepting a suggestion to resign, was the head editor of the Republic, Nikolai Kirnoka, and there's a great chance certain other heads of central newspapers will leave their staffs. The 4 independent editions have been refused the services of the basic polygraphical base, the Belarusian House of Press. Finally, the head of the Department of Information of the President has also resigned, Alexander Fiduto, who provided the direct contact between the presidential apparatus and the mass media. Everything began with a report of the deputy Sergei Antonchenko in Belarusian parliament on the cases of corruption within the presidential team, which was not allowed initially to be aired on television and later on pages of newspapers, as a result of which, for the first time on them, white spots appeared, which escalated the conflict. I presume that to fight with the press and stifle the press is probably the same thing as to extinguish a raging flame with gasoline. In information reports, frequently we hear reports about the operations of the former KGB of the USSR. At times, this is used as a means of political battle, especially frequently in Estonia. Today, a new phase of investigation began there. The draft law was submitted to the Parliament of the Republic and may be adopted in the next few months. Pursuant to that draft law, those individuals who had served in organs of state security or had cooperated with them during the course of a year will be offered to bring their statement of admission to the security police. Those who will voluntarily admit having cooperated with the KGB or other such type of organizations will receive a type of indulgence or dispensation. That is, any information about their cooperation with the state security organs will be classified. Those, however, who refuse to repent will face the so-called public defamation. Their names will be published in the government press. In the draft law, there's also a list of the security organs and intelligence. It includes 8 Soviet and 4 German structures. The Minister of Internal Affairs of Estonia, Kaido Kona, added that despite the fact that the lists of agents of the KGB and the USSR intelligence at one time were taken back to Russia, the security police of Estonia today already has information about thousands of KGB agents who were working under the code of the Soviet rule on the territory of Estonia. The judicial process over the former leaders of the Communist Party of Latvia resumed today in Riga. I'll remind you that Alfred Rubiks and Aire Patriki are accused of an attempted forced state coup. The break in the prosecution lasted 1.5 years because of the illness of the main prosecutor. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, Peres, and the leader of the PLO, Arafat, are attempting to regularize their disagreements over realizing the agreement to create Palestinian autonomy. The Palestinians insist on the withdrawal of Israeli forces from its Arab-populated areas on the western bank of the Jordan River. However, Israel agrees only to a partial evacuation and only from certain Palestinian towns. 29 years in prison was demanded by the prosecutor of the Madrid court for the weapons dealer Al-Qasara, arrested in 1992. As a result of the investigation, his involvement was proven in the 1985 hijacking for Palestinian terrorists of the Italian liner Achille Lauro. The hijackers demanded, in exchange for the lives of 600 passengers, to release Palestinians in prisons. Only hours after recapturing 3 criminals who had escaped from incarceration, 3 more escaped from the central English prison. The previous escape had evoked a storm of disdain in English society and became the reason for criticism against the government of John Major during parliamentary hearings. Of greater indignation was the fact that the escape was made from a top security prison known as the English Alcatraz. Today in the Romanian port Constanța, the search for seamen from 2 vessels which sank was abandoned. Details in the report of our special correspondents. The tragedy occurred on that side of the pier. There, at a depth of more than 20 meters, lie 2 large cargo ships, or rather, what remains of them. One belonged to a shipping magnate from Greece, the other from Hong Kong. 5 days of rescue work established the chronology of events and reasons for the shipwreck. On that fatal night, on the outer fringe of the port Constanța, there were 12 ships. All of them simultaneously received a storm warning and were ordered to leave the danger zone. Some went into the port, others into open sea. But the crews of the ships Paris and Yuhu did not submit, and now it is clear that because of malfunction, the crews could not start up the engines on time. They were offered assistance, but evidently not wishing to pay $50,000 or $60,000 for rescue aid, the seamen refused, and the port authorities didn't insist. The SOS was sounded far too late when no one could help any longer. Around the period of the winter equinox on the Black Sea is always unique because of unusual storms, but such a hurricane is not remembered here. The waves exceeded 10 meters per hour, 10 meters in height, and the winds were so strong that they blew off a fire rescue vehicle left on the pier. For several hours, the anchored ships were dragged by the winds. The enormous ships, more than 100 meters in length and of a height of a 6-story building, they crashed into the mole, leaving such gaping holes. At the first possibility, all the civil and military rescue ships of the Constanța port arrived to the site of the crash, but they could only confirm the deaths of all 54 crew members and gather up items and bodies of sailors spewed out onto the shore. Today, in an automobile crash near Beijing, 60 vehicles collided. This is the Chinese capital's largest ever vehicle crash. Police who arrived with amazement discovered only one body. The rest of the people escaped easily with only injuries or just extreme shock. 7 people died and more than 20 people were injured during an automobile crash in Austria. The tragedy occurred early in the morning when a bus, which was transporting Yugoslavian workers, collided with a transport trailer truck on the road. The most frightening occurred after the impact, when the bus was literally torn in half and people began to fall out of it under the wheels of passing by cars. Strong hail and sleet were the reason for more than 1,000 accidents on the roads of northern Germany. During the last day alone, injured in such incidents were at least 70 people. All highways have been closed, and also many schools and parents have been ordered to not allow their children on the streets. And again, about the political events on the world arena, again, careful attention is drawn by Yugoslavia. According to reports from Belgrade, the International Contact Group has changed its approach to its plan, which it developed on Bosnian regularization. This was confirmed by the American Deputy Secretary of State on European Affairs, Richard Holbrooke. Yesterday in Sarajevo, he conducted talks with the head of the Bosnian Muslim government, Haris Seladic. It's necessary to note that last Thursday, the contact group, which includes representatives of Russia, the United States, Great Britain, France, and Germany, met in Bonn. And after it, probably for the first time, there was no mention of the maps of territorial division of Bosnia-Herzegovina. There was also no statement of the need for the unconditional fulfillment of the peace plan in its former form. According to Richard Holbrooke, the contact group currently sees the plan as a basis for further talks and not as the ultimative demand to the Bosnian Serbs. The new turn in the issue of the Bosnian regularization was confirmed by Haris Seladic. In other words, the Serbs, Muslims, and Croats, not on the battlefield, but at dialogue tables, must define an entire series of problems of jointly living on the territory of the Republic. The first days of the new year inspire a certain optimism. The 4-month truce agreement, which took effect the 1st of January, is being observed overall. On all Bosnian fronts, a peaceful situation remains. Clashes have ceased in western Bosnia. Along the Republic's roads, humanitarian convoys have begun to move. The complete peace in Bosnia, of course, is far away. The 32-month war has hardened the people's hearts. But the future depends on the realism of all warring sides and their approaches to the questions of Bosnian regularization. The President of the United States has no end of criticism, and now his favorite cat, Socks, is getting his dose. Socks, apparently, now also spends too much of the taxpayers' money. Any American can leave the President's cat a message through electronic mail, which is connected to the White House computers. Expenses, including personnel, are assessed at tens of thousands of dollars. If the President's cat is in constantly online contact, why not organize something similar for Congress? A new communication system for regular Americans with Congress was called Thomas, in honor of Thomas Jefferson. Now anyone who wishes through home computer can punch up on the screen texts of all laws adopted since 1992. In the near future, also accessible will be the texts of all speeches delivered by congressmen. America's entering the 21st century. This was stated at the opening ceremony for the new system by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Newt Gingrich. He offered tax cuts for those who for now can't afford computers. However, to communicate with the cat or study congressmen's speeches is not of interest to all, especially abroad. This animated movie has already brought to the Disney company $300,000 in profit, but it's only shown in movie theaters. That's in America. In China, it's already on video cassette. Maybe someone in Russia's seen it as well. The unlawful copying of films and computer programs cost the American economy billions in losses. The trade representative, Mickey Cantor, announced an intention as a punitive measure to levy economic sanctions against China. Today, in the report of our correspondent from Spain, a certain sadness peeks through. He talks about the end of the Christmas festivities. Spain has abundant traditions and customs. Many of them relate to Christmas, New Year's, and Easter. However, if these holidays are familiar to all Europeans, the Day of the Magic Kings exists in no other country of the continent. Officially, it seemed to have been invented for children, but for some reason, adults also celebrate. Not one family will sit at the table on that fiesta without the traditional loaf, a marzipan-decorated sweet bread. The municipality of Madrid, abiding by the laws of the antecedents on the square of the Gates of the Sun for citizens, displays its baked good. This loaf weighs 1.5 tons and is intended to serve 8,000. The beginning of the communal treat is launched by the mayor of the capital, the prominent activists of the Conservative National Party Alveros del Manzano. Incidentally, recently he visited Moscow. Fighting off the local press, the mayor congratulates Russians with the past New Year and Christmas holidays, advising us also not to forget the traditions of the distant past. And late in the evening on the streets of many cities, carnival parades were held. And now I want to ask you to remember, when was the last time that you went to the cinema? Since the cinema art is undergoing a certain crisis, but let's hope it will not die, stepping over its 100-year mark anniversary. Have a look what's happening in Paris to return the viewers into the movie theaters. This moving picture, which recorded workers leaving the Lumière plant in Lyon, the brothers Louis and Auguste Lumière, in 1895, opened the path for the unknown then world of cinematography, as they called their invention. The event, whose centennial in the birthplace of cinema, France, will be broadly celebrated all year long. More than 1,000 of the first chronometer-recorded documentary films, a few moments long, taken by the Lumière brothers after restoration, will be seen by the broad public for the first time. One can't count all the exhibits of retrospective viewings, conferences, and symposia planned throughout the country on the anniversary. A gift for film lovers on the 15th of January will be waiting when each visitor that day to any movie theater in France will be given a free ticket applicable for all shows during the course of the entire year. One can imagine the crowds, Babylon style, of those desiring to receive such a valuable ticket. If in 1975, Nicolas Seydoux, says the president of the cinema company Gaumont, cinema was the only inimitable audio-visual tool, today it no longer has the monopoly and has to make efforts in order to tear viewers away from the screens of home televisions and attract them into cinema halls. And no matter how surprising, but Louis Lumière himself 100 years ago saw his invention as only an attraction which would tire the visual senses and whose interest he felt would pass after half a year. Well, that was his brilliant mistake. And again, the day today in Moscow. Traditions, which my compatriots apparently are reviving with pleasure. Winter holidays and holy days were always the favorite and most venerated in Russia. And just as in the olden days, in the first days after the feast, the smokestacks below columns. Masquerade festivals in the Kolomskaya by merriment is not inferior to old celebrations when people gathered on the Rogozhskaya, Tverskaya, or Yemskaya to ride on the troikas with sleigh bells. And if today a bird can't find a troika, the Russian soul, as previously, burns with fire of delight and youthfulness. To dance and laugh, they're always ready. And also to glance into the future and see one's promised brides and grooms, and look how many of them are growing up. They remember Russian traditions. They will tell you about the Christmas carolers and how to chase away evil spirits and how even to dress for the occasion. They know everything, even to the very day of Epiphany. In Moscow, there will be celebrations. On such holidays, it's a sin not to enjoy and frolicking and forget woes and worries, forget despondency and rejoice. That's why we have the holidays. I would very much like you to be in a good mood more and ahead of you as the sports overview. All the best. Good evening. Today, after a long break, the tournament of the International Hockey League has resumed. In Moscow, the Dynamos of the capital hosted the Torpedoes from Nizhny Novgorod. The most dramatic moment of the match was with a score of 3-2 for the Dynamos. This result had held out practically till the end of the game. 10 seconds before its end, Vorobyov scores the fourth goal. 4-2, a victory for the Dynamos. From the other matches, we'll single out the victory of the Wings of the Soviets over the Army team, 7-3. And we don't yet know the results of the other matches yet. During the school holidays in Kostroma, for the first time in the history of the club, the Golden Puck, rural team competitions were held. The winners were the young hockey players from Podmoskovia. Pleasant news from Canada. There on the World Freestyle Competitions, the Russian Sergei Shupletsov was the first in mogul, and in the ballet on the Sparrow Hills in Moscow, the Igor Stolarov Prize was won by Yelena Batalova. In the Dutch Hellenen, the European skating championships have ended. The best in the classical races among the women was the Dutch Ginda Niemann, and among the men, again a Dutchman had the best score in Teritsma. The Russian Vadim Sarutin came in fourth, and this is how they welcomed the winners. After the day of rest, the caravan rally Paris-Dakar, the voyage continues along the roads, that is, the sands of Mauritania. Victor Moskovsky on the Kamaz has previously is the leader, ahead of his closest contender by almost 35 minutes. More details about the rally on channel Ostankino at approximately 21:45. Good evening. Tomorrow, warm air from the Atlantic will bring to the Karelia, Murmansk, Arkhangelsk, and Nenetsk autonomous district regions cloudy weather with some isolated periods of light snow, temperatures from 0 to -5. It's partly cloudy without much precipitation in the Volga-Vyatsk area. During the day, -7 to 12. Baltic countries in the northwestern area will be under the influence of a cyclone, which is quickly shifting from the Atlantic to the south of the Botnic Gulf. It will be cloudy with isolated snow and rain with visibility of 15 to 20 meters per second. Temperatures are around 0. A warm atmospheric front will bring unfavorable weather with isolated patches of snow blizzards and strong wind gusts to Belarus and the south of Ukraine. And temperatures of 0, -5. Moldova and South Ukraine will have extremely cloudy skies with some snow. Temperatures around 0. The east of Ukraine and the central Chernozem and central areas will remain in an area of high pressure. Expected is variably cloudy skies without much precipitation during the day, -5 to 10 degrees. In the central region, -2 to 7 degrees. An area of high pressure will influence the central and lower Volga and the north of the Rostov district. Here, partly cloudy skies will remain with temperatures of -7 to 12. Over the lower Volga, 0, -5. Unfavorable weather with snow mixed with rain in the Stavropol-Krasnodar Rim areas and also in the south of the Rostov district and in the republics of the northern Caucasus. The roads will be icy in morning and evening hours, fog. The reason for that is a lethargic atmospheric front. Temperatures during the day in Stavropolia, -1 to 6, in the Krasnodar and the South Rostov areas around 0. In northern Ossetia and Ingushetia, -1 + 3. In the Chechen Republic at night, 0, -3. During the day, 0 + 3. In Dagestan during the day, +1, 6. In the north, +2, -3. Residents of the Transcaucasus area will see partly cloudy skies with temperatures of +5 to 10 degrees. In Petersburg, it is cloudy in the afternoon, snow during the day, -2 to 4. In Moscow, prevalence of cloudy skies with some isolated patches of snow, day temperatures -2 to 4 degrees. This information was compiled by the Oceanic Meteorological Center. All the best. Goodbye.